Good morning. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Richard Vobes. It's the 13th of July 2022. And I often think that we are sometimes unable to think for ourselves if you look around the world, mainly because there's so many signs and instructions all over the place. And they're easy to follow, of course, and there's arrows telling you where to go and where you can sit and where you can't sit and what grass you're allowed to stand on and what grass you're not allowed to stand on. But I wonder if we're beginning to become so reliant on all of these things that we can no longer think for ourselves. Maybe we've become a society of wanting to hold hands all the time because we're not able to cope on our own. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. If you look around the roads, certainly in the country I'm in England, there are road signs that tell you exactly where to go, which lane to be in, where you can park, where you can't park. And all of this, there's so many signs. And in fact, as a driver, and you're driving around, you've often these days people have got a sat nav which is instructing them where to go. There's road signs on that. There's signs in the street. There's all sorts of bits and bobs. Then there's the advertising hoarding going along. And of course, people have their hands-free telephones. And it's absolutely amazing, I think, that people can manage to get and navigate from one place to another with this plethora of instructions or sales pitch or advice that's being bombarded to you. The human brain, I think, is an amazing thing that can sift through all of this. We have the lines painted on the road so you know exactly where to go. However, I do believe that there was an experiment. I don't know where it was. I'd love to know, and if anyone can tell me, please do. I seem to remember reading about it about 10 years ago. There was an experiment, not in this country, but somewhere, and I think somewhere in Europe, in which all the street furniture was removed in a certain area for a certain length of time. Maybe it was a new road being put in or something like that. And there were junctions that you had to turn at, but there were no instructions whatsoever. And people actually started to manage to do these things very easily because they started to use their own common sense. They started to use their brain again and go, oh, I'm not being told what to do. I think at first it was quite confusing for people. There was no arrows. There was nobody there to hold their hand and nudge them in the right direction. But I think over time, if I've got this right with this experiment, people found it so much easier and were able to cope. And so I wonder if there's too much of this, the red lights to stop you going at junctions, the arrows to tell you which way to go down a certain road, the stop signs that force you to stop if only for a beat before you can turn left or right. Are we in a bit of a nanny state? I mean, it isn't just, of course, on the roads. I'm talking about everywhere. I was watching a farmer, it was, talking on one of these islands. I can't remember if it was the Isle of Skye or one of these little satellite islands up near Scotland or somewhere around there. And his parting comment, I should say, was that he was very happy because there were no roads, there were no motor cars, and there was none of this sort of street furniture and stuff up there, which got me thinking about this. I gather that on the trains up in London, and I don't go up to London very frequently, there are signs reminding you at a station to buy a ticket. Really? You don't say. You've got to buy a ticket when you get on a train? I think we know that. That's fairly common knowledge, isn't it? There's another one that says, buy a ticket and find a seat. As if and there was seats around. Surely the brain and the eye seeing these seats would think, oh, I can actually sit down. Oh, I think it says find a seat and sit down. I think that's what it said. Find a seat and sit down. Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't actually say find a seat and sit down on your bottom. Because I feel like that bit of information was lacking, that actually, not just sit down, but sit down on your bottom and rest the weight downwards, because gravity will do the rest for you. Are we just being led too much? And are we able to, no longer able to think for ourselves in this society? Caution. There's a lot of these caution things. When you buy a classic case is, I think, one of these burger outlets, a very famous burger outlet, that somebody bought a jam something or other, jam donut or a jam apple pie. Was it an apple pie? Could have been, I can't remember. Anyway, they bought this thing, they bit into it, and it was hot. They'd had a hot apple pie and the apple bit was warm, was not only warm, was hot, baking hot, and apparently they burnt themselves. So they took it to court, became a legislation case, and so now, of course, it says caution, hot when purchased, or warm, or warning, hot when you buy it, or whatever, hot apple pie, warning, it is hot. Are these things really necessary? Is it important that we're being led like that? I just wonder what it does for our psyche, that we seem to just not able to cope unless we are now led hand by hand. We have the mainstream media telling us how to think, what to think, who to choose. Say, for example, in the Parliament race that we've got, or the Prime Minister race at the moment, we seem to be people acting like sheep that we needed. Maybe that's just a human condition. Maybe I'm a bit different to that I'd rather not. I'd rather figure things out for myself. Although, admittedly, sometimes, in this world, I do feel a little bit lost, and I think, golly, actually, I've got to work this out for myself. I wonder if I've still got the skills to do that. It would be easier just to phone a friend or go online. Do we rely too much on things like YouTube to go and find out how to do things? I mean, it is a wonderful resource, as with Wikipedia, a great resource for information. But what I'm trying to get at is, I guess it's like the kids that, no longer have to learn maths because they can just use a calculator. Most of them have got a gadget or a phone that can work out the sums. Do we need the knowledge to work things out? Do we need all this common sense, seeing as everything else around us in our bubble will work it out for us? Be interested in your thoughts on that. That's my subject for the day. Let's have a little look at some of the comments and mentions that have come in over the last 24 hours. Now, I was talking about being smart, and of course, I was hung by my own petard, was I not? I wore a waistcoat yesterday, and in my haste to get to the show and be as prompt as I could, I buttoned up my waistcoat badly, and I hadn't checked it. So there was me. So the irony of me saying, "Oh, but I try to look nice and presentable," and then the irony is, of course, I've let myself completely and utterly down. And well done to those beady-eyed people who could manage to work out that I'd got the buttons in the wrong order, and somebody pointing out, "Oh, but Richard, it's the bottom button an Englishman on his waistcoat leaves undone, not the top one." Yeah, thanks very much for that. I do feel a complete and utter prune, and I'm able to laugh at myself, so have no fear on that. Well done to the eagle-eyed. And also, yes, my shirt apparently had a rip there. I didn't know. I've had that shirt for donkey's years. It was something like a £3 or £4 charity shop shirt. I buy most of my shirts from a charity shop, to be honest with you. For about £4, you can buy several 10 shirts for the price of a brand new shirt at that sort of ratio, and you're not killing the planet or all putting people under slave labour by buying second hand. I think if something's got an extra life, why not go for it? It's cheap. And it could have belied, it may have looked like, oh, Richard, he looks like he's got a load of old money because he dressed smart, which, of course, you don't need a lot of money to dress smart. Although, again, the irony, I let myself down. So apologies for that, and well done for those of you clever people who've noticed. So, anyway, Vintage News says, waistcoat buttons. He says, but you tale of being treated well. Not quite sure your English is working here, but we'll plough on. But you tale of being treated well. You're getting the dress well bonus. The effect is amazing. Right on, Commander. Props and other positive sayings. Yeah. Thanks for that. I might need that explained to me, because even my common sense is struggling with that. Have modern standards slipped in this era? Sean Ginley says, yes. Thanks. Rachel Gregory says, standards have slipped. Manners never go out of fashion. Let's talk about controversial topics too. Oh yes, I mentioned that I would talk about the controversial topics, that I don't think it's a good idea to sweep them under the table. It is good to expose these things and dissect them, even if we totally disagree. She also says, have some critical thinking. I do try to do a bit of critical thinking where possible, and thinking that the funny thing about thinking and people's thoughts is they change. I do think sometimes we're in a world in which you say something and people think that that is exactly your definitive statement and that you will not budge on it. And with a bit of thinking, we all change our mind. We all think, I do this, I want to do that, such and such, I love doing that. And then over time, not so much. Maybe I've done it too much. Maybe I didn't really like it in the end. Maybe there's an element to it that I didn't know about. So we do change our minds. So our thoughts aren't always just stuck in concrete. Debates are always interesting. Look and celebrate the differences of opinion, she says, and learn to be more tolerant of each other. Absolutely. That's the key. I mean, tolerance is a very good thing. Nick Rowland says, I think it's been a debate in every generation going back in time. This is about the standards. He says, look at this quote. The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Children are now tyrants, not the servants of their household. They no longer rise when their elders enter a room. They contradict their parents. They chatter before company. They gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. And who said that? Apparently, Socrates said it. But that said, it may have been said all back in the time of Socrates. But I think there were times, like during the Victorian period, when, depending on the class of those children, they changed. It would be nice to, I'm talking about children, but everybody to have some form of standard rather than slipping completely. Jem Hanks is asking about the name of the new channel I was thinking about, which is now some time ago we were talking about this. Says, what about the Whimsical Explorers? How does that sound? Well, that sounds very lovely, actually. And Louise says, here's a question. Since you have the theme that you're on a quest for all things British, well, my Bald Explorer is on a quest for England, so it's not all things British, it's actually English stuff, but let's let that slip. Do you prefer to have comments, suggestions from people who are from your own country? It does seem at times, and she says perhaps I'm imagining it, that you want to hear only from your fellow Britons rather than us scallywags from other countries. No, everybody is welcome, and I have no problem with that. I don't know whether you're talking about, you see, these are on the Vobe Show platform, and the Bald Explorer's Quest for England is a completely different thing. It's still me and Julia. And so sometimes it can get very confusing when you're talking about the Bald Explorer on the Vobe Show, if you see what I mean. So either way, though, the answer is, I don't care where you're from, you're very welcome to put your opinion on if it's not rude or insulting. So I don't... Well, I do. I curate the on the Bald Explorer particularly, but I will remove certain comments if people are rude. I just think you could, as I tried to explain the other day, you can be rude out in the street, but not in my house, and that's how I treat the page. So if you want to be rude to me, then you're very, very welcome, whoever you are. But if you're rude to me on the page, you're likely to have the comments taken away, because got the ability to do that. YouTube have given me that ability. Andrew Bradbury says, you look respectable, always tidy looking, even when working. And I speak very good English, a good listener. People don't always listen nowadays. He says, I'd always said that you'd have made a good Radio 2 presenter, maybe to replace Ken Bruce. Well, didn't they get rid of Steve Wright? I wouldn't mind doing Steve Wright's job, although I do like getting out and about. I don't know how these long-term Radio 2 presenters can keep that job for so long. I mean, it's lovely to have the stability of that, definitely. But I think I would find, as much as it would be lovely to do this, and I love doing this because this is quite a short format, but to be stuck inside a studio day after day after day, where I love to get out, as you will see in my Bold Explorer stuff, in my van with the lovely Julia, and explore England particularly, and then the rest of the British Isles. That's my favourite thing, especially in this beautiful hot weather. Maybe in the winter job would be getting into a nice cosy studio and snuggling up with the audience and having a good old chinwag about this, that and the other. Anyway, I'd be interested in your comments about, are we in the nanny state where everything is are we being treated stupidly, I suppose is the real question. Do the elites, do the people in charge feel that we're so thick that we can't work things out for ourselves, and that we need signs or pointers or guidelines or anything like that so that we can be managed? Maybe there's an ulterior motive to it, who knows? But anyway, leave your comments. I'll be fascinated to hear your points of view. Until the next time, thanks for listening. Bye for now.